Welcome to the Classic Cinema Society podcast, and we're writing a letter to Daddy today. I'm your host, Christopher Pistol. Every episode, I bring on a guest to discuss a classic movie, and we talk about its place in cinema history and how it holds up today. And today, we're talking about 1962's Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
My sister doesn't ever go out. She's not fit to receive visitors.
Jane, I want to talk to you.
I've written a letter to Daddy. His address is heaven above.
I've written a letter to Daddy saying I love you.
This film was chosen by silly actor, comedian, maybe filmmaker, my friend Susan Gordon. Hello, Susan. How are you doing?
I'm good. Where? Where? Baby Jane's here. Where?
Oh
I'm just
no. Oh
kidding.
no, you have a baby Jane in
I
the
do,
corner
yeah,
there.
little doll, getting ready for the.
It's cropped like half, like it's just half its face is
If he
cropped in,
moves
cropped
during
out.
this, I will. If audiences would like a visual description, I have a doll, much like that will be described as one of the main characters having in this
It
film.
looks like Chucky with brown hair.
His name is Buddy.
Oh.
Buddy. Wanna play?
No,
Okay, well,
it don't.
anyway, we'll put him away. I'm putting the doll away.
Well, before okay. Well, before we dive into the film today, let's get to know our guest. I know you pretty well, but tell us a little bit about yourself, Susan, and a little bit about your film journey.
I'm an actor. I like to act, but only the kind that has a period at the end, as in act. Period. I don't do any of that silly pretend stuff. I only do highfalutin act. Period. I've always loved movies. I've always been playing around. Is that a good?
Yeah.
That's a good bio. That's my official Wikipedia.
Did you when you were little, did you watch movies and then like act them out? Or like maybe even like pretend that you were in them or like have like extended universe?
I
Did you like
would.
riff off of them?
I didn't have that. Well, I did, but I didn't. I was 8 years old and I begged my grandmother. I said, "Grandmama, bring me to the library," because I had seen this acting book at the library.
You were Matilda.
I love the movie Matilda. That's probably why.
You were Matilda.
And then my grandmama wasn't Danny DeVito, so she said she did smoke cigarettes, but that's beside the point. Sorry,
Did
me
you call
mom.
her grandmama?
No, I called her me mom. And me mom
Oh, okay.
brought me down to the local Heinston library, and I rented an acting book, and I went in my room by myself, and as any child would, I did it for about 5 minutes, and then I said, "I'm bored," but I did do one of the exercises in this acting book.
So did being an actor, did that come from wanting to be in movies, or did that just come from a desire to act?
I have no idea. I think it's just who I am. I know that's a really maybe that's common for a lot of actors. I just don't see it just makes sense. I have no explanation.
Mhm.
I just have my existence. But then like now I'm at this point where
Right.
I want to go back to making stuff because I do like making worlds and I do like it. I just prefer the acting. But it's like you have no control in the acting world. So making stuff
Mhm.
is good because then you get to do it all the time.
Yeah. I feel that way too. Of everything I've done, I went to film school, but I've also acted in plays and stuff, and that's the most fun I think
It
I've had.
is, isn't it?
I'm afraid I have bad news. We'll probably have to sell the house.
You aren't ever gonna sell this house. And you aren't ever gonna leave it.
She's sick and she's not getting any better.
You mean Jane? I think she seems much better lately.
When you were younger, were you drawn to old movies at all?
Okay.
Or did you like just watch like what was the newest thing?
My parents are the ones who introduced me to any old things. I think that's most people.
Sure.
So I did watch a lot of Gilligan's Island. I loved I Love Lucy. Laverne and Shirley's really good. Lots of sitcoms. I'm trying to think of an old movie.
Yeah.
I didn't actually like Gone with the Wind. It was too long and sad, boring. People
Yeah.
would hate me for giving that. That's a kid
No.
critique, but
No, I think that take is more popular
that makes
now
sense.
than
It's
it's ever
not been
been.
aged too well, huh? Anyhow,
No,
no.
there's things about it that haven't aged well.
No. But yeah, I just remember being like, this is boring. And then The Sound of Music, hated that. Thought it was long, boring. I really did. I'm not kidding. This is a kid review. I've not watched these movies since I was a kid, but being a kid, I was like,
Well,
ugh.
those movies are over 3 hours, so it's pretty fair to call them long.
I didn't like
And
The
if you're a
Wizard of
kid, they're probably
Oz.
not super
I
interesting.
didn't like The Wizard of Oz either.
That's a hot take.
But it was because when I was a kid, I thought it was boring and that the monkeys were scary. I'm trying to think of an old movie. I like this 1970s movie. I don't know if that's in your podcast timeline, but this horror movie called The Changeling that my family showed me is so good.
I love that movie
So
too.
good. Such good acting.
George C. Scott.
Yes, he's so good. And it was scary. Like I
Yes.
get freaked out by it still.
Yeah,
Yes, it's very scary. But then that wheelchair part's kind of funny.
totally agree.
But mostly I watched, I guess, modern 90s movies.
My wife's an art teacher and she'll put on movies at school, and if she puts on something that's like live action and in the 90s, so it's from the 90s, they'll be like, this movie's old.
Yeah, but Willow's so much better than any of the animated versions of The Hobbit that was created the other. Like it's just not good. So I just CGI
Sure.
takes me out of it sometimes. Like it just doesn't.
Well, the movie you chose to talk about today, when I asked you what you wanted to talk about, you immediately said this. You wanted to talk about whatever happened to Baby Jane. So, what's your relationship with this movie? Can you remember the first time you saw it? What was your reaction?
So my first time watching it was only last year, but I heard about it growing up from my mom and my aunts, and they were like, "Oh
Oh.
yeah," because my mom and my aunts they would talk about this movie and how scary it was, and then 2 years ago, I don't know, time moves quick. Might be two, might be one. Someone was like, "Do what is that? A mid-Atlantic accent." So then I went on a
Mm,
YouTube tangent on Betty Davis, and then I
mm.
googled her IMDb, and then I saw this movie, and I was like, "My mom and my aunt talked about how scary this movie was." And then I just watched it with Olivia, my wife. 2000s movies references for that. But anyway, what was I talking about? I got distracted. Oh, then we
You
then
watched
we
it?
just watched it, and I saw one of the most iconic performances and one of the best stories. Movies don't necessarily have the best stories anymore. When they do, they're really good, but they can be really bad now because Shakespeare. Because we learned storytelling from Shakespeare and we haven't really pivoted very much. And then we do the
Sure.
same kind of story and then it gets boring. So this was like mind blowing. I was like, this is old. And it's usually, as you know, I get bored. I get very bored with old movies. This one, it was just, I just remember being
Maybe
like,
you only think you get bored with old movies because you haven't seen the right ones.
I think that's it because this one changed me. I was like, well, and I like The Changeling, right? And that's a good story.
Yeah.
Oh my god, this one freaking acting galore. I even like Joan in it. Betty stole the show. I hate to tell Joan Crawford.
Yeah, I think we'll get into that
Yeah.
at this point. I saw this a few years ago. Yeah, I think it's interesting because it is in this era where it's like clearly still a classic movie. Like when I threw this on, the first thing my Melody said was like, kind of like, "Oh, it's in black and white." Like she's watched plenty of black and white movies, but she kind of was like, "Oh, I thought this was going to be like more recent." But it does feel a little bit more like it's got that classical acting style. But it's also like pushing the boundaries of like violence, good taste, and horror. Like you said, your mom and aunt like told you about this movie. I think this is definitely a movie that like our generation's parents probably saw when they were like too young
Mhm.
and maybe scarred them a little
Mhm.
bit.
I was cleaning the cage. The bird got out.
You wouldn't be able to do these awful things to me if I weren't still in this chair.
But you are, Blanche. You are in that chair.
But it's also like very psychological,
Mhm.
and I think that's another level to it being so disturbing that it's not, the stuff in it is very emotional, and it's dealing with a lot of like psychological abuse,
Yes.
familial abuse,
Mhm.
stuff that I think can hit really close to home for some people.
Yeah.
Which
Really.
is funny because it's this movie has a reputation of being rather camp, or at least like
What? Why are
it's
all
gotten
my
the right.
favorite movies considered camp? This is some of the
Well,
most honest acting I have ever seen.
Well, I think that's, sort of how it was perceived in, like the 90s or when we were growing up. But I think I personally would reevaluate this and say that I don't think this movie is camp. I think
No.
it's genuinely affecting, genuinely creepy, and the performances in it are really, really
They
fantastic. I
should
mean,
have
it was
both won.
accepted that way when it came out.
Mm.
Um, I think there's also stuff about Betty Davis and Joan Crawford's like real personal lives
Mm.
that sort of affect that a little bit. We can get into it at some point, but Joan Crawford, like sort of garnered this reputation of being camp, which she's actually more down to earth in this movie than I think most people realize or most people give
She's
her credit for.
very, very. I could go on about their performances, and I will because I'm on a podcast. And I'm allowed to. Um,
Yeah.
Joan Crawford, she did a really good job. I think everyone did a very good job in this film. Everyone played their part. Like even the mom of that guy. Oh, Lovey, let's get you a
She
job, Lovey.
I did not look up if she's really English or
No,
not,
I don't
but
think
if
either of them
I
are,
don't
but
know.
I didn't care. I was like, I'm living for
Oh,
it. I'm living for it.
see, I thought maybe he was, but
Mm-mm.
yeah, I was
His
like, she's
accent
doing some Dick
would
Van Dyke.
it would go in and out, his accent, and I'd be like, I'm fine with it. He's a good actor.
Okay.
But you can look it up and prove me wrong because you know what? I'm assuming, and assumptions make
Yeah.
you write a letter to daddy. But what I'll say is, what was I talking? Oh, Joan Crawford. She played likable very well at the beginning, and then like there's a twist at the
Mhm.
end, right? It didn't really like the twist.
Mm.
I thought was unnecessary for the whole plot. I was like, Betty Davis has earned this villain, and I get it. It gives her empathy and understanding. And why would she stay so long? Because abuse is abuse, man, and you get addicted. Like your brain. Anyway, that's a whole thing. It's called a cycle. Look it up, okay? The cycle of abuse. It's depressing and real. But anyway, what was I talking about? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the performances in this are good. Yeah, we can talk about the twist at the end. We're just gonna go
No,
ahead
we
and
were
spoil
talking
this
about
movie
their
for people.
feud. We were talking about their feud, right?
Yes, I mean, Betty Davis and Joan Crawford. It's kind of funny their feud because so much is like made of it
I
of
think it's
Hollywood
made up.
history.
I think it's a lie.
It's it's definitely I mean it definitely is like a real thing, but I think it's also more conflated, and it was also I think at the time fueled by the studio
Mm.
because they thought it would be good while they were making this film. They thought it would be good for business if the feud in real life sort of like was in the public conscious. And I think it was also just made good tabloid reading, so it was also I think fueled in that way, but they had so much in common in real life, which is the funniest thing. Um, and their rival is just as interesting. I think it's an interesting story about Hollywood ego more than anything, and how especially women are treated within that system, and how they're sort of like pitted against one another um, in a lot of ways, just to sell movie tickets in this case,
Oh, and like
because this
the
movie was.
not in the movie, but in real life, like the kind of story they told to get people to go.
Yeah, this was definitely. I mean, the public was very aware that Joan Crawford and Betty Davis had like a feud or did not
I
like each
think that
other,
was one of
and
the
so.
things my family talked about. So it
Mm.
if like a little kid that was like I think my mom was 2 and my aunt was 3 when this movie came out. If a 2 and 3-year-old can like quote, "Oh yeah, and Betty Davis and Joan Crawford actually hated each other on the movie set," then you know it worked. That marketing campaign really worked its magic.
Jane, please. Don't do this to me. Jane! Jane, please!
From what I know about them in real life, I think it was kind of the case of like Betty Davis just liked to sort of like playfully talk shit because she knew it would bother Joan Crawford, and Joan Crawford was kind of like almost like a stuck up like and apparently Betty Davis said of Joan Crawford, she's a movie star and I'm an actress, kind of a thing.
She
Um,
acts with a
yeah.
period.
And it's interesting, they both go into this movie playing these roles. I think the part that Joan Crawford plays is a part that would definitely attract her as an actress. It's very sort of like the sympathetic
Mm-hmm.
role, the one who's like abused and really earns the audience's sympathy throughout. And then the Betty Davis role is just like fun. It's just like she gets to go like all out, she gets to 100% just like drag her through the mud and just grab the camera and just like go for it.
See, and I, as an actor, I've played both kinds of the like where you get to be like the Betty, that my soul is the Betty Davis choice of like that is like I see that and I'm like
Mhm.
that is my dream is to play a character like this. And Joan Crawford, I was like, I would get cast in that and I'd have to play it. I would have to play it. Like, that's how I view these characters. I'm like, as an actor, right? I'm like, man, I would have the best time playing this freaking best
Okay,
time. I'm
you
gonna
can
read.
swear.
Yeah, I can swear.
Yeah, you can swear. It's
But
okay.
does Betty Davis? Oh, Betty Davis did say bitch in this movie. And then they cut it, they took the audio out. And I was like, I
They
see what you did
did,
there.
but the subtitles told us what she said.
Yeah, and like I could see myself being cast in the Jane. I was about to say Jane Fonda, Joan Crawford's role. Jane Fonda is in this movie. No, I could see. Wait, I have ADHD. Can I say something I just thought about?
Yeah, go for it.
I know I'm like complimenting the part. Can you talk about how that guy? What's the guy's name? That Irwin. When Irwin at the end,
Edwin Flagg.
Edwin Flagg, how he discovered Joan Crawford's character in the movie was hilarious. He was in the wheelchair, and then he goes, wee! And then, but it's perfect because it totally looked like the. Okay, I love this movie. Anyway, you should lead this podcast. I have millions of things going on in this
You said
head.
you wanted to say something.
What was I going to say though? That's the issue.
I'm baby Jane Hudson.
Oh. Do you mean you're really the baby Jane Hudson?
Oh yeah, I love Edwin Flagg. He's probably my second favorite performance in the movie after Betty Davis, just because he doesn't say a whole lot, but everything on his face, he's just doing so much
So
with his face.
much. And
I
you would
mean,
play him.
every look,
You would play him in a movie like this. Don't you think you'd be
just
cast?
all the. It would be fun. Just all the looks that he gives whenever she's singing and talking about her. Don't you know who I am? It's so
Oh.
great.
Can we talk about Joan Crawford. I was a little offended by the way you described Betty Davis's work in this movie.
Okay,
I thought
elaborate.
I think you said like she could go all out and be I think she played that so grounded. That is why it's my
Hmm.
favorite performance. Everything was earned. She like if you read a script, right? And it says, I have to put my sister's dead bird in her lunch tray and I have to give it to her, right? You have to think of backstory, memories. Why would this person do this? And sometimes that is so difficult to do is be like, why would a person put a dead bird? But I never once questioned motivation. I knew it the entire time. Like it
Mhm.
was phenomenal. And I love Joan Crawford. She did the cry, sad, Victy, me. Loved her love for Elvira. We'll get into that. That's my favorite Joan Crawford choice. She could have, leaned more into the gayness, but that's 60s stuff, I'm hungry. Anyway, so aren't I a great podcast guest?
It's fine.
But every choice, I can't. Did she win an Oscar for this? Can I make her one and put it on her gravestone?
She so
The whole
um
thing.
is so she was so this kind of extends into the real life um uh Davis and Crawford feud. So both of these women were really hoping they would be nominated for Academy Award. Um, and but Betty Davis is the only one who is nominated. So she's nominated. Joan Crawford is not.
Mm,
Okay. Everybody thinks that Betty Davis is going to win this year. She's like a shoe in,
yeah.
is what they say. But Joan Crawford is like, well, if I can try to steal this from her, I think I will. I'm assuming that. But what Joan Crawford actually does is that she calls up other actresses who are nominated who can't go and says, "Can't since you can't go, would you mind if I accept the award? I'd be glad to accept the award for
I
you.
think I heard about
Like go
this.
up on stage and accept the award for you." And Olivia de Havilland, who is an actress who's also nominated this year, says, "Sure, absolutely, you can do this." So Joan Crawford and Betty Davis both go to the ceremony. Betty Davis is nominated. She loses to Olivia de Havilland. And then Joan Crawford goes on stage and
Is this
accepts the
real?
Academy Award.
Is this
This is real.
real?
This really happened. And accepts the
Fuck.
Academy Award for Olivia de Havilland.
But can you? Okay. Can I just
Clearly,
say?
just to spite Betty
Can
Davis.
I just say? This is amazing. The queens are queening. Joan Crawford, okay, you may not have done the best performance in Who's Baby, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and you did a wonderful, I'm talking like 10 out of 10 performance for the role you had. But show stealer Betty Davis over here, you said, I'm gonna steal this Oscar. That is a performance of a lifetime right there. Just
So
going up on
I
the.
would recommend, if you want to see a great Joan Crawford performance that is also very queer coded, I would definitely recommend this movie from the 50s called Johnny Guitar.
Okay.
Uh, it's kind of a quasi western, but it stars Joan Crawford, and she has the biggest balls in that movie. You would not believe. Super great.
Oh my god, I'm so excited. Johnny
It's a very
Guitar.
it's a very subversive type of performance. It's really great. So, fun fact: when I was living in Los Angeles, my roommate got a job working on a television series that was about Joan Crawford and Betty Davis and their feud. And the show was called Feud. And we got to go to the premiere at the Chinese theater, and it was the only premiere that I got to go to
Were there
see
any
the
Betty
first
Davis
episode.
and Joan Crawford impersonators?
Oh, I wish.
Aw, because I would have totally done that. Like, I definitely, after seeing this movie, went as Betty Davis in this movie for Halloween that same year. So, if they remake this movie, which they should not, my dream would be. But I don't want to touch this role. Here's how I would do
Yeah.
this role. If it was a stage play version, I would do it. But I wouldn't even want to touch it. It's perfect. I don't need to touch it. It's done.
So is Betty Davis your favorite thing about this movie? Like, is this sort of like why you love the movie, or is it
Well,
are there multiple things?
everything's.
Tell me about what you love.
I love so much. Okay, I'll just go off on my mind. I don't have bullet points. My mind is an explosion twister of joy. Speaking of this movie, the writing is phenomenal. I think every character has a reason. Like even the guy who gives the piano lessons, like he has a fight for, which is like he needs money and his mom, he's a mama's boy. He has daddy trauma. So does Betty Davis's character, daddy trauma, which I don't even want to get into what I think she used as her backstory, but you can imagine. I genuinely think she played that. I think she did wonderful. I don't want to assume or say any triggering things, but Betty Davis, really, really loved it. I just really fucking loved it. And then the writing's really good with the bird and the cages, the visuals and all that. And then the gay love story between Blanche and Elvira, which is really cute. And then I just love everything about the storytelling because there is always like a through line of like, is she gonna get to the phone? Like they built
Yeah.
that story with Joan. Like she had these like, and I'm just gonna say it. I think that last scene of this movie. Okay, I didn't like how they had the twist. That's the one thing I was like, the writer earned everything. I understand that's good writing. I understand. We need to see some empathy for the villain. That makes complexity. But I already had empathy for Betty Davis's character. I
Yeah.
already saw her pain. It was like Betty already did the work. And like, I get
Mhm.
it. That's good writing. And maybe it was in the book. I think this is based off a book, right?
Ooh, that's research I should definitely know.
Maybe I don't know. So anyhow, the
I can't
ending
remember.
is phenomenal. It is everything. It is everything that character could be in that moment. It led up to it because the story was building. Elvira unfortunately passes away, and I
That's
didn't
fair.
expect any less from a 1960s film. That's all I'll say. But what I love about this movie,
Yeah.
shortcomings, um, is how complex the characters are and how like open they like. It's just like not cookie cutter casting. It's older women. It's queer coded.
Yeah.
It's a bigger guy. They're not attractive. Joan Crawford's attractive. It's not a cookie cutter movie, and it's just such unique actors. Like it's just unique. What
Yeah.
was I talking about? Oh, the ending. I just wish they would have.
I think the ending. I want to say this. I think the ending is interesting, not necessarily for Betty Davis's character, because I agree with you. Like as horrible as she is, throughout the entire movie, you feel that sort of sadness for her, and I think she earns that sort of sympathy from the audience. I think the twist though changes a little bit retroactively how you feel about Blanche,
That's true.
because Blanche is, a victim the entire film. She is nothing but sort of made to feel bad about, But when you really think about that twist and what that information sort of reveals about her, and that she's been keeping this secret for 30 years, that's pretty messed up. I think that really changes how you feel about her as a character.
It does, but at the same time, I didn't see that from Joan at all. Like there could have been hints. There could have been. I think it was in the writing and how she would try. Here's the tough part, right? In
Mm,
emotional abuse, you pretzel so that the other person doesn't react. And oftentimes, Joan Crawford's motivation was saying what Betty Davis's character wanted to hear so that she could feel safe.
yeah.
With the new information that was done at the very end, how I would have directed it, which I'm not a director, but if I knew that before like directing it, maybe that used to be how she would manipulate Betty Davis, you know? Like it would be more
Hmm.
manipulative. And then it would maybe could have been there. Maybe that's the good writing. Like I see that twist at the end, and it's like, oh, she's been manipulating her this whole time, and they're both abusive towards each other. But it's not like that. It's more complex gray area. I would have been. I think Joan Crawford. Does she not like being unlikable? Like the actress? Have you seen her be villains?
I think that she does prefer to take that sort of sympathetic role. Like I think this is the role she wanted to play in this
Yeah,
film.
and she did a really good job. I think that last line, it's like, how do you sneak in Easter eggs of that, like that in the
Hmm.
performance? But honestly, a twist is difficult to play because you don't want to give anything away before you have it happen, right? So it's a conversation with the director, and maybe I'll rewatch it and see some choices she made and be like, maybe that. But from this is my second watch of the movie. I didn't pick up on anything other than maybe like the language, the script. I don't know. I think they all did a phenomenal job. That just came out of nowhere, and I was like, I didn't need it, but I liked it. I liked it for the writing. I liked
Yeah.
it for human behavior.
So Susan, you're not somebody who necessarily like watches a lot of old movies, but you love this movie. And so I'm gonna ask you, why do you think this movie is still important, or why should people, who necessarily don't watch old movies, should check this out?
I think as someone who doesn't watch old movies, people assume that people weren't people in back in the day. It's easier to like separate yourself from the human experience looking on the back at people and be like,
Mm,
oh, people were so different than now.
right.
Okay. Like I can't connect to that. And it makes you
Hmm.
feel different and more important, maybe, than like what people were doing in the past. But when you watch a movie like this and you see writing like this, and you hear
Hmm.
Edwin's character say, that's how I was made, wasn't I? When he was yelling at his mom, "Mommy."
Yeah.
And like you hear his trauma and it's like, no, people have been humans this entire time. Culture just changes. The way people interact with each other, like physically and culturally, changes, but we still have the same amount of complexities, and that's what I really like about this movie is it doesn't it's funny. It has its hilarious moments. Like it is funny, but it is definitely
Hmm.
about the tragedy. It's tragically funny. Everything is
Yeah.
tragically funny. Um,
Hmm.
so I think it's just a really good story about very. It's important because people get emotionally abused, and people who with disabilities get abused, caretakers abuse.
Hmm.
Like it's just real. And
Yeah.
I think they both played it so well. Like, there's no denying the honesty in this movie. Everyone just did so well. Everyone did so well.
Yeah.
Like, it's like the writing's good too. When you have good acting, good writing, and good directing, I mean, you can't lose.
Yeah, we've talked about this on here before, but there's I think a lot of assumptions that most old movies are sort of that don't hold up or have this sort of fake veneer
Hmm.
about them. Like I use Singing in the Rain as an example. Like Singing in the Rain, I love that movie, but it's a very like stylized type of old movie. It's a very heightened sort of reality, and I think there's an assumption that most old movies are like that. But this one obviously is very grounded and and very psychologically
Yeah,
creepy.
so good.
um, I think this movie should also be shown to any parent thinking of getting their child into show business.
That's a big thing that's come up over the past like
Hmm.
year. I like, in
Yeah.
fact, listened to an entire podcast by that person, Allison Stoner, because I think they're they them now. Um, about being a child actor, and it's crazy. As an actor, as an adult, I
Hmm.
get why it's crazy. This is a very hard industry, even for someone who's not even that successful. Me,
Yeah.
yeah, it is. It's hard, and it's sad.
I think it's yeah, and I think it's always interesting when there are movies made about that. When it's sort of a self-reflecting thing of
Oh
Hollywood like
yeah,
looking on
and
at
then they had
itself.
a kid
Um,
acting and performing in the first scene to portray this story, and I was just thinking to
right.
myself, they're talking about this child actor being overworked, and they're working. They have a child, but they have to use a child actor.
Hmm.
But I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's an important statement about how, Hollywood treats actors, both within its own narrative and in real life, surrounding this movie because it stars two actors who were really big in the 30s and the
yeah,
40s, like that footage that we see at the beginning of the movie that they're
I
watching
know.
is like real movies.
Mhm.
It's real Betty Davis movies they're watching, So these are two actors who are sort of, um in Hollywood standards past their prime, past their sort of like,
That's why people need to see
ability
this
to
movie. That's
be in
why.
movies.
Because
Hmm.
it literally stars, I mean, besides the comedic relief and her love interest, Edwin, the pianist, um, it's older women. That movie is dominated by older women. You look at
Hmm.
Hollywood now. I just watched an actresses roundtable. They're all stretched out, fillers, Botox, everything. When you look at Betty Davis in this movie, there's this one shot that was angled down, and this is my dream as an actor. She wasn't in shape. She was an alcoholic,
Yeah.
like asshole. Let's be honest, abusive asshole who had a trauma, which I talked about earlier. I really genuinely believe. Why does she miss Daddy so much? I'm just saying, there's something happening between. Something happened, and I don't like Daddy, but it kept her in that young age. But anyway, she had this. Her stomach was just out in this like silk gown, and I was like, would Nicole Kidman do that? Yes, maybe, but it would be for it would she still couldn't get you still couldn't not see the filler in her face, right? So maybe she would hunch and have her
Yeah.
stomach because she's an actor, right? But Betty Davis didn't give two shits about how she looked, and it worked
Yeah.
so perfectly. Like again, the people cast, yes, it is whitewashed. There's mostly white people except for Elvira, who unfortunately dies in a horror movie, which anyway, first person to die. But all I'll say is it's queer coded, it's cast so uniquely. Like it's cast better than I watched this movie, Twisters. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
I did not like it. My friends don't understand why I didn't like it. I thought it was bad writing, and I thought that all the casting was done out of, like, obligation versus, like, unique choices, and this is a movie where
Mm.
I felt like the casting was done through honest work, like, it was through honest storytelling. I don't know, I think, like, things need to be diverse, of course,
Yeah.
but find the honesty. Where are the people? The acting in that movie, it was so flat and boring. Can I be honest? I left halfway through Twisters and went home. I did not finish.
It is. I'll just say this: that it is. We watched like the original Twister, and it is funny to see like what type of actors were put as leads in movies
Yeah,
in the '90s. Like, I'm not saying Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt are unattractive, but they look definitely more like normal people
normal.
than what is most people that are leading movies now.
I don't mean to shame. I've been watching a lot of botched on YouTube. It's just on my mind.
No, it's fine. No, I think it's great. I mean, this film was like a huge hit when it came out.
Yeah,
So I mean, this was a um, really a highlight for both Betty Davis
that
and
makes
Joan Crawford.
sense.
In fact, I think for most people, at least for our parents' generation, this is like the movie that they're most remembered for. Um, yeah, I would definitely though recommend Johnny Guitar if you're curious to see like Joan
Yeah,
Crawford or
she's
Betty
so
Davis in
good.
their prime. Johnny Guitar is great. Mildred Pierce is great as well. And for Betty Davis, she was in one of the biggest movies she was in was called All About Eve, which is another movie about actors. She kind of plays like an older
I think
actress
I have
who
a
is
quote from that movie that I learned when I was doing
oh nice.
busy
Yeah, she plays like an
little
older.
bees all buzzing around. That's all I got from like 2 years ago when I practiced. Was she enunciates certain words, which is why people are
Yeah.
like Betty Davis is campy, but it's also like for this character it worked perfect.
Hmm.
Busy little
Sweet.
bees.
Was there anything else you wanted to say about whatever happened to Baby Jane before we head out?
I think it's just one of my favorite movies now. I think it's so good. I think I want I like this is why I like movies. You know, I also like Amadeus in the same way. I just think they're so good. They're good stories, good
That's great
characters.
too.
It's just good. Just a good movie. Watch it if you have the time. It is 2 hours and 13 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's a little too long,
They could have
maybe.
cut out some dead
Just
air,
because
but I don't care. I loved every moment.
I mean, the second time that she's brought another dead animal on the
The
plate,
rat.
I'm just kind of like
But
a little repetitive.
last thought, what's cool is that did illustrate abuse in that like sometimes there is a dead animal, sometimes there's not. So like
Hmm.
I understand why it's realistic, but also yeah. The rat. The rat. Okay, that's all I got to say.
Well, Susan, thank you so much for joining me today. Is there anything you want to promote?
Not yet. You can follow me on Susan Gordon Actor at Instagram.com.
I was
Instagram.com?
gonna say people can follow you on social media and enjoy
Yeah,
your more of you.
follow that because I'm gonna have things to promote later, but not right now.
Okay, well, I'll put your social media information in the information on this podcast so you can see it there.
Okay.
All right. Well, we love old movies. I'm sure you do too because you're listening to this. So you can reach out to us on Twitter or Threads. I don't know, Susan. I'm kind of in between Twitter and Threads right now. I don't know which one. I hate both of them, honestly. But you can email us at classiccinemasocietypod@gmail.com if you really want to talk to us. And please let us know what you thought of whatever happened to Baby Jane. And you can find me on Threads or whatever. Search at Chris Pistol. You can find me right
I'll
there.
get it.
Make sure to subscribe and share this podcast. One of the best ways to help us is to leave a 5-star review. It really is the best way to help and reach more classic movie nerds like you. Thank you for listening.
We're not done. I gotta end it with the song. Should I do it like a child or should I do it like old Betty Davis? I'll try and do it like her after the cigarettes.
Whatever you.
I wrote a letter to Daddy, whose address is heaven above. Okay, that's all I got.